Well, it's a little bit after 10. Let's go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Alan Lusk. I'm one of the Friends of Hagerman board members and generally the one that hosts the second Saturday program since we've been going virtual. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here today. We've got a great program lined up, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the Native Americans in celebration of Native American Month that we're in currently. If you haven't checked out our new website, I'm going to post a link to that and also a link to where you can become a member and help support the various projects and work that we have going on at Hagerman. So without saying any more, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Knowles, our program chair, and she's going to introduce our speaker today. And following the speaker, we will also have Jeff Gladden, who's going to announce the winners from our photo contest that we had back in September. So with that, Susan, I'll let you get started.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm so pleased that you joined us. We have been so excited to have Wilson Seawright speak with us about Native American services and his involvement since the 1980s. In that time, he has received numerous awards for his work and achievements. He is currently an archivist for the Chickasaw Cultural Center in Sulphur, Oklahoma. He's been doing this since 2016. And like I said, we are so pleased that he is here. Wilson, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always glad to share information about the Chickasaw Nation and Native Americans as a whole. So as Alan mentioned today, or this month, is Native American Heritage Month. And I had originally planned a different PowerPoint, but I decided on this one because it covers, it's mostly Oklahoma natives, but I did throw in a little bit of information about Texas natives, and so I hope you'll enjoy it. This is we call this PowerPoint a did you know type PowerPoint. You know, a lot of different comments, excerpts about Native Americans across Oklahoma, and even some nationally, just comments about did you know this about Native Americans. And so that's how the PowerPoint is set up. And so I'm just going to go through it and then talk about some of the things that are on the PowerPoint screen. And at any time you folks have questions or need clarification or want more explanation about something that's on the screen, I'd be happy to stop and talk to you about the different things that are that I'm talking about or showing here. So to start off with, we got the name of Oklahoma comes from two Choctaw words, Oklahoma, and which means people, and Huma, which means red, Oklahoma, red people. And this is attributed to Allen Wright, who was a Choctaw chief right after around the Civil War time, right after the Civil War. He was given credit for creating the word. Oklahoma, the land of the red people, of course, became the 46th state in the United States on November 16, 1907. In Oklahoma, we have 39 federally recognized tribes within our borders. And I had actually planned to look and see how many were in Texas, but I got busy and didn't get that done. So Oklahoma is certainly linked to the Native American culture. Many of the 252,000 American Indians living in Oklahoma today are descendants from the original 67 tribes inhabiting Indian Territory. So over time, there's been 67 tribes that have been either living in Oklahoma or had some connection to Oklahoma. But today there are only 39 of those federally recognized tribes. And in 2005, 8.1% of Oklahoma's population identified themselves as Native American. I don't have any more current information as far as the percentage, but it's holding around 8%. Some say even 9 or maybe 10%. So there's on the screen there, it shows you a listing of the 39 federally recognized tribes here in Oklahoma. Most of these were not native to Oklahoma originally. They were brought in or removed from other parts of the United States and came to Indian Territory beginning in the 1830s with the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So did you know that Ben Tincup, Native American, was a pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies early on in the early 1900s, his professional baseball career? And actually the Chickasaw Nation has a Native American that was a Chickasaw, native Chickasaw, who was also a pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. Moore pitched for the Philadelphia Phillies in 1934, 35, and 36. So the first official Chickasaw Constitution was ratified on August 30th of 1856, and Cyrus Harris was elected the first governor of the Chickasaw Nation. Chickasaws, we in Chickasaw Nation, we have a governor instead of a chief. Prior to this, though, prior to 1856, we did have chiefs. Our leader was identified as chief or Minko. We call him Minko in Chickasaw language. But in 1856, our first official constitution, we first began using the term governor as the leader of the Chickasaw Nation. That meeting in 1856 happened at a place called Good Springs in the Chickasaw Nation. While they were meeting there, part of their work, they established the name of the community that was there on Good Springs and began calling it the community of Tishomingo, today the city of Tishomingo in south central Oklahoma. Did you know that Roberta Campbell Lawson was the first Native woman a woman of Indian descent to be elected president of the National Federation of Women's Clubs? And that there were a few, on another note, there were a few jails in Indian Territory, as the convicted was often either given a number of lashes or told to go home if their affairs in order in return for execution. And the vast majority of those individuals who were told to go home in return, they did return. It was considered dishonor to your family and the tribe to not follow through with an execution if you were convicted of a crime for that. There in the bottom corner of your screen, you'll see the Choctaw whipping tree. Chickasaws also had a whipping tree, which is on display near our traditional capital in Tishomingo. For the execution, if they were going to be executed, they would stand next to the tree and actually be shot. If it was a lesser crime, they would have to take lashes with a whip, standing tied to the tree, that be lashed with a whip. To carry out these activities, we had what we call light horse police. And you'll see there William McClure, who was captain of the Choctaw Light Horse Police, light horseman for the Choctaw Nation. Chickasaw Nation also has a light horse force, as do I believe the Creeks and the Cherokees also. And then down in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the execution of Silas Lewis, who was a Choctaw, where he was shot. Athletes, many Native Americans were athletes. Here's a screenshot for Jim Thorpe, who was Sac and Fox and Potawatomi. He's considered by many to have been the greatest athlete of all time, and at least he was voted as the greatest athlete of the first 50 years of the 1900s. And he competed in the the Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden. He won the pentathlon and decathlon gold medals there. Later on in this slideshow, on slide number 22, you'll see a Chickasaw, Cab Rennick, who also won a gold medal. In fact, there's only been 3 Native Americans in the history of the Olympics to win gold medals. And that's Jim Thorpe, Chickasaw, Cab Rennick, and Billy Mills, who was a Sioux, who won in 1962 or 64, I think, 1964. So Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City or Midwest City, many people are familiar with Tinker Air Force Base. Well, it was named for Major General Clarence Tinker, an Osage. He was the first Native American to be a general in the Army Air Corps. His plane vanished somewhere during World War II over the Pacific in the Battle of Midway, and his body was never recovered. But they named the Air Force Base in Midwest City, Oklahoma, after Clarence Tinker, Tinker Air Force Base. Then Stan Waddy, who was a Cherokee, was the first brigadier general in the military. And he was the last Confederate general to surrender at the end of the Civil War. There's a photo of Brigadier General Stan Waddy. For the Chickasaws and Choctaws, we both tribes sided with the South in the Civil War. Chickasaws and Choctaws had what we call the Chickasaw Choctaw Mounted Rifles, a brigade of cavalry who fought in a few of the minor battles in Oklahoma and Arkansas, but there's not a lot of documentation on the actual military activities of the Chickasaw Choctaw Mounted Rifles. The ashes, did you know the ashes from the Indian stomp grounds in Tulsytown, Alabama, were brought to Indian Territory over the Trail of Tears by medicine men in 1828. These were, and the new fire was kindled and the campsite became known as Tulsa. Charles Curtis was a Kaw Osage. He's the only American Indian to be elected Vice President of the United States. His allotment was in Kay County, Oklahoma. And there's not ever been a Native American who's been president, but the closest thing that we have is Charles Curtis, who was vice president under Herbert Hoover in 1932. Did you know that Oklahoma is the second largest population of Native Americans in the country? California has the largest population. There are over 5 million American Indians in the United States. I think that was as of 2010 census. And the number of Chickasaw voters, 37,120 in January of 2020. That's the registered voters in the Chickasaw Nation. Our total population is anticipated to be around 60,000. Oklahoma is second in the nation for Native-owned businesses. And since we're second in the nation for total population of Native Americans, that stands to reason that we would have the most or second most Native-owned businesses. And Oklahoma is the home for 2 of the largest tribes in America. The Cherokee ranked #1 in population, and the Choctaw ranked #3 in total population. The most recent information that I was aware of, the Chickasaws were ranked #8. Tulsa and Oklahoma City are #4 and 5 on the list of the top 10 cities with Native American populations. And for you folks down in Texas, the Dallas metro area is pretty high on that list also. I don't know exactly where they rate, but they're pretty high on the list. 76.3% of Native Americans finished high school, and it's higher than both the Hispanics or African American populations. Oklahoma is one of the highest Native American populations with only 1 mineral reservation, and that belongs to the Osage up in the north part of the state for their oil reservations. After 1890, the east half, which is mostly the land of the 5 civilized tribes of Oklahoma, was known as Indian Territory, and the west half was Oklahoma Territory. Prior to that, the entire state of Oklahoma was considered Indian Territory, and that's where they were removing many of the native tribes that came to Oklahoma because it was all considered Indian Territory. But the Organic Act of 1890 separated the state into 2 sections. Again, the east half was Indian Territory and the west half was Oklahoma Territory. The primary reason for that, so that they could open up some of the what they considered unused lands for the land runs and open to white settlement. So that all happened beginning with the land runs of 1889. Oklahoma has over 100 or over 70 Indian Health Service, tribal urban health care centers across the state. And there's also one in the Dallas metro area. Did you know that federally recognized tribe means that they have a legal relationship with the United States government? This is referred to as a government-to-government relationship, much like many other foreign countries would have a government-to-government relationship with the United States. And just below that, at the bottom of your screen, it shows that there's an excerpt from a sentence from the United States Constitution that deals specifically with Native American tribes. What does that say? I know you can't read that probably on the screen, but it says to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So beginning with as early as the United States became a country, Native American tribes have had a presence and a legal relationship with the United States government. Here we go in Texas. By the time the Europeans arrived in Texas in 1528, native Texans included the mound building Caddos of East Texas, the Karankawas and Attakapas, who fished the East Texas coast, the town dwelling Jumanos, who were along the Rio Grande, the hunting and gathering Calahutians that were in South Texas, the corn growing Wichitas in the Panhandle. And over time, Texas became home to the horse-mounted buffalo hunting Apaches, Comanches, and Kiowas, and became a refuge for the Tigwas, the Alabama Coushatas, and the Kickapoos. So there's been a number of tribes throughout the history of Texas that have been either associated with the state or actually had homes there. Didn't mention there, but then also in the southeast part of Texas, the Tonkawas were there, and probably the best known tribes or the most known tribes that roamed around Texas were the Apaches and Comanches, and they were nomadic tribes. They didn't necessarily have homes or locations in any particular place. They followed the buffalo and that sort of thing, and were roamed around. Kiowas also. In the United States, 565, which I think actually is 567 now, federally recognized tribes across the nation, including 200 native villages in Alaska. John Harrington, a Chickasaw, was born in Wetumpka, Oklahoma, and he's the first Native American astronaut in space. He flew the 2002 Endeavour mission. Proud of our Chickasaw people. In Scott Momaday, Kiowa Cherokee won the Pulitzer Prize for his novel, Housemaid of Dawn, the only Native American to ever win the Pulitzer Prize. So did you know that Johnston Murray, a Chickasaw, is the only Native American to serve as governor of the state of Oklahoma? He served from 1951 to 1954. The only Native American to serve as governor of the state of Oklahoma. Johnston Murray was the son of Alfalfa Bill Murray, and Alfalfa Bill Murray married a Chickasaw woman named Alice Harrell. So that's where Johnston Murray got his Native heritage. The United Urban Indian Council has been providing education and employment training to Native Americans since 1974. And did you know that Native Americans, Indians, do not get payments from the government for being Indian? Which I've heard over my lifetime a number of people saying that natives do get a payment from the government for being Indian. Well, that's incorrect. It's not true. Now, Chickasaws, over time, we have received payments from the federal government, but originally that was because we sold our lands in Mississippi and Alabama, and the government held those payments or held that money in trust for us because they didn't think we could handle it, and then divvied it out over time. I think the last payment was received by the Chickasaw Nation from somewhere between 1859 to 1878. And there's the federal government still holds money for the Chickasaw Nation in trust from sale of mineral rights, land leases, and things like that from individual Indians, Native Americans. Did you know the Choctaws were the first code talkers in the United States military in World War I? Of course, the Navajo get a lot of credit for being code talkers in World War II, but in World War I, the Choctaws were the first ones used as code talkers. And it's got a photo of Joseph Okolumbi there, who was a World War I code talker, and some other photos of the code talkers. Among the code talkers was actually 3 Chickasaw men. We had Otis Leader, who was a Chickasaw Choctaw, who was one of the code talkers. Peter Maytubby, he was full-blood Chickasaw, but he lived in the Choctaw Nation. He understood Choctaw language, so he was one of the Choctaw code talkers. And then a third person, Ben Colbert Jr., we don't think Ben Colbert Jr. ever went overseas, but he was being trained to be a code talker before, when he enlisted and during the time of World War I. Here's a photo of the 36th Division of the United States Army, and the Choctaw code talkers were part of that. I might also note that in World War I, there were approximately 12,000 Native Americans who served in World War I, and over half of those voluntarily enlisted. They weren't part of the draft. They voluntarily enlisted at the start of the war, and they served admirably throughout the war. And what's unique about that is that at that time, most of the Native Americans in the United States were not United States citizens. So many of these individuals volunteered even though they were not United States citizens. And it was after World War I, and partly because of their service in World War I, that the United States passed the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act, which made all Native Americans across the United States United States citizens. As an added note, Chickasaws and all the 5 civilized tribes, once they accepted allotments in 1906, they became United States citizens many years before most of the other tribes across the United States. So did you know that the first group of Chickasaws to be part of the removal on the what we call the Trail of Tears left Memphis on July the 4th, 1837. The Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, Muskogee, and Cherokee all made this forced exodus from their homelands in the southeast part of the United States. So July 4th of 1837, Independence Day for most of the people in the United States, we as Chickasaws didn't feel very independent when we were forced to leave our homes in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Did you know that Native Americans do not speak one language? English is the primary language of Native Americans today, and however, there are still approximately 250 tribal languages still spoken as a second language. Here in the Chickasaw Nation, we have probably about 40 fluent speakers still left, and that number is dwindling. We're making a concerted effort to renew our language and so that it will continue to thrive for many years to come. Here are some tribal greetings, just a few from some of the tribes that are headquarters here in Oklahoma. You'll note that the Chickasaw typical greeting is chokma, which it says hello there, which that's the word it's being used for. However, it's more like a greeting of are you good, or is all good with you. And you'll note that the first one up there, Alabama, which people say Alabama were actually part of the Choctaw at one time, and Chickasaw and Choctaw language is very similar. They have their greeting as Chickma, which is hello or how are you. So Chickma or Chokma from the Chickasaw Nation is very similar. Choctaws also have the word halito, which is considered hello for they're in their language, and then there are some others there. But also I might note that there is no Native American nation across the United States that has a word for goodbye. None of the natives have a word that means goodbye. Here in the Chickasaw Nation, we say chopisalacho, which is means that we will see you again, or because and all the Native Americans feel that at some point we will see our loved ones and all others again in our afterlife. So there's no point in saying goodbye, because we will see you again. The removal time was not a good time for the 5 civilized tribes. And here you see a map of where just before or during the time of removal, these are the locations of the 5 civilized tribes, and these areas were much reduced from where their original territories was. For example, the Chickasaws, we were shown there in the northern part of Mississippi, but we originally had ventured all across the western part of Tennessee up into Kentucky, and then over the northwest part of Alabama. So, but just before removal in 1832, we'd been reduced down to just the north part of Mississippi there. And then the Choctaws were just below us, and the Cherokees over to the east, and the Creek also in the east in Alabama and Georgia. And then down in Florida, the Seminoles. And these, if you look real close, you can see the routes that the different ones took. So, many people say, or many people that don't understand think that all the tribes followed one trail across to Indian Territory. Well, you can see that there were many trails, and they didn't all go at the same time. For Chickasaws, the first group again left in 1837. And what we considered the last group was in 1842, but there were still, even at that time in 1842, there were still a number of Chickasaws in Mississippi, and some of them trickled over to Indian Territory after that, and some of them stayed in Mississippi. Today we know that there are Chickasaws in Mississippi, and the Choctaws down south in Mississippi. There's a number of Choctaws in Mississippi. In fact, the Mississippi Choctaws are a federally recognized tribe, as well as the Eastern Band Cherokees who are in the Carolinas. They're a federally recognized tribe. So, and the Florida Seminoles, there's Seminoles who didn't ever leave Florida who are still there, and they're considered the Florida Seminoles as opposed to the Seminoles in Oklahoma, Seminole tribe of Oklahoma. So we covered the 5 tribes covered most of the southeast part of the United States, and currently reside in Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma. Here's a photo page for Jesse Cab Rennick. He was Chickasaw All-American basketball player at Murray State College in 1938 and All-American at Oklahoma A&M in 1940. He was captain of the United States Olympic team in 1948, and he's been inducted into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame, the Oklahoma State University Hall of Fame, Chickasaw Hall of Fame, and the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame. We're proud of Jesse Cab Rennick as a Chickasaw. So did you know that Native Americans pay taxes? Each individual Native American is required to pay taxes just like everybody else. We're no different than any other American across the United States. And the same laws apply to Indians as non-Indians. However, not all Native Americans dance the same way. You'll see some there, down at the bottom, the powwow fancy dancer and the Kiowa black leggings, they're powwow people. All of your Western tribes in Western Oklahoma and the Western part of the United States are what we consider powwow people. But over in the Eastern part of the United States, all the 5 civilized tribes and most of the other tribes that are in the Eastern part of the United States are stomp dance people. You'll see a photo of that on the right side of your screen there. Stomp dance is a slower, more deliberate type of dance, and originally was for religious ceremonies or healing ceremonies. Today, it's the stomp dances are more social. Just to give people an example of what the stomp dance was like, as all the 5 tribes across the Oklahoma and the United States have converted more to Christianity as opposed to the religious stomp dance. So once again, the Chickasaws were granted United States citizenship when they accepted allotments in 1906, and Oklahoma became a state in 1907. However, Native Americans as a whole were not granted United States citizenship until 1924. And again, primarily because so many of them signed up to fight in World War I. And the Native Americans are the only United States minority group that must legally prove minority status. If you say you're Native, they ask you to show your CDIB, Certificate of Degree of Indian Blood, or citizenship card to prove that you're Native, but no other ethnic or minority group must do that. The Kiowa 5 were some of the earliest Native Americans to receive international recognition for their work in the fine art world. Native Americans many Native Americans have distinguished themselves today in the world of art, and you see it all across the art markets in the United States. Of course, the Kiowa 5 were actually 6 Kiowa artists, so I don't know why they were called the Kiowa 5, but when there were 6 of them, but it composed of 5 men and 1 woman. And it gives you their names there. So did you know that 32 of Oklahoma's 77 counties are named after American Indian tribes? Words are famous Native people. And you can see those that are identified in the yellow there across the state are all Native American names or people, and they're listed below there. Personally, I live in Carter County, Ardmore in Carter County. Carter County was named for Charles D. Carter, who was Chickasaw, the first United States congressman from the state of Oklahoma in 1907. And I work in Murray County, Sulphur in Murray County. Murray County was named for, actually named for Alfalfa Bill Murray, who married a Chickasaw woman. And his son, Johnston Murray, again became governor of the state of Oklahoma. And I grew up in Johnston County, which is just to the east of here. And Johnston County was named for Douglas Johnston, who was governor of the Chickasaw Nation at the time of statehood. So all the counties that I've really been associated for most of my life or have connections to, particularly the Chickasaw Nation, as well as Love County to the south of Carter County, named for Sobey Love, or Judge Sobey Love, or the family of the Love family, which was predominantly Chickasaw. And of course, you can see all the other counties across the state that have Chickasaw names or related to Chickasaw, or not Chickasaw, but Native American names. Notable performers, Adaloa McClendon, the Shoshana Mobley, and Teata Fisher, all were notable performers. Adaloa was a concert vocalist. The Shoshana was an opera singer, and Teata Fisher was a storyteller. So all very, they're nationally renowned performers, and performed not only in the United States, but abroad in Europe. The first Native American Miss America was Norma Smallwood, who was a Cherokee from Tulsa. She won the Miss America crown in 1936. Cherokee actor Wes Studi was born in No Fire Hollow, Oklahoma. He spoke only Cherokee until he attended grade school, and has become a well-known actor. He starred in the movie The Last of the Mohicans. He starred in the movie Geronimo and Dances with Wolves. So those are just some of the movies that there's others that don't come to mind right away, but he's probably the most well-known Native American movie actor. Did you know that Oklahoma has 4 tribal colleges? The Cheyenne Arapaho College, Pawnee Nation College of the Muskogee Creek, and the Comanche Nation College. World War II, Jack Montgomery, a Cherokee, Ernest Childers, Muskogee Creek, and then in the Korean War, Raymond Harvey, Chickasaw, were all awarded the Medal of Honor. In Oklahoma, I believe in the United States, there's only been 5 Native Americans who have the Medal of Honor, and these are 3 of them right here, 2 of them in World War II. I mentioned that there was approximately 12,000 Native Americans that fought in World War I. Well, in World War II, it's estimated there was approximately 44,000 Native Americans who served in World War II. And I did have the numbers for the Korean War and Vietnam War, but I don't have them readily available. I believe actually there was more in the Vietnam War than any other the previous wars. So the Chickasaw Cultural Center in Sulphur, Oklahoma is a window through which the world can learn who we are as Chickasaws, and through which all living Chickasaws can see themselves. So it's not only for our cultural centers, not only for us, but it's for the people who want to know about Chickasaws or Native American cultures as a whole. I might also add that Chickasaws were very involved in the opening of the new First American Museum up in Oklahoma City that opened in September. So those of you in the North Texas area, if you ever want to take a road trip, stop by the Chickasaw Cultural Center in Sulphur, Oklahoma, and go on up to Oklahoma City to the First American Museum. I think you'll probably, or you will enjoy either one of those or both of them. Chickasaws are known as unconquered and unconquerable because they have never been known to have lost a battle in recorded history. Never known to have lost a battle in recorded history. So, the Chickasaws can be documented to have fought alongside the United States in the French, as early as the French and Indian War, Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Mexican War, Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, and the conflicts that we've had in the Middle East. So Native Americans have a long history of a warrior society. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share this information. I certainly would be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have in regard to the PowerPoint or anything relating to Chickasaws or Native Americans. Questions, comments?
It's very good. Looks like Kidda raised her hand. Feel free to unmute yourself, Kidda, and ask your questions. Anybody can also put a question in the chat. There was a question earlier, Wilson, from Donna that was looking for clarification on the mineral reservation by the Osage.
Well, the mineral, what I was referring to was that there's a reserve there for their oil wells. You know, the Osage, they're pretty well known for the oil exploration in Osage County. In fact, I might add that there's going to be a movie out pretty soon about the individuals who tried to take advantage of the Osage. Killers of the Flower Moon is the name of the movie. There was a book written about it a few years ago, and now they're making it into a movie. So, but that's what I was referring to as it's a reservation for held in trust for the Osage, so that others, non-reputable people, might not take advantage of them. The Chickasaws and Choctaws had a similar mineral reservation in southeastern Oklahoma for coal and asphalt, and all those rights were sold back in the 1930s. So we no longer. It's all individually owned by either coal or asphalt companies and such. Whereas there's still a reservation for mineral rights in Osage County.
Got a couple of questions from Betty that was asking if the Chickasaw Culture Center is now open really after COVID, and what kind of events could we expect to be able to see there at the Cultural Center?
Cultural Center is open. We reopened July and the latter part of July for public to come through and view our museum, Chachapoya, the exhibit center, and Halisso's open, the gift shops are open, but we are not scheduling any events to hold down any possibility of continually expanding the COVID issue. So we're not planning any big events anytime soon. Perhaps maybe by next summer we'll be able to do something like that, but we are open to the public, just not scheduling any big major events. I might also add our theater and cafe are currently under renovation to expand and make better. So, so they're not available right now, but should be after the first of the year.
Sam asked an interesting question about in the original Native American culture, did Indians have both a first and last name, or just a single name?
Yeah, most of them had only a single name, which makes it so difficult to trace back to any further back than the early 1800s. Many of the mixed bloods took on two names, but the full bloods and higher blood quantities mostly had one name. Example, my great great grandfather, his Chickasaw name was Illapambi. Just the one name. It was a Chickasaw word. I don't even know the meaning of it, but that was, and then he took on the name of George Keel. Where he got the name George Keel, I don't have any idea. But that happened probably around removal around 1830 to 1840, because the first note of him being called George Keel is in 1848. And prior to that, he was called Ella Bambi. So that's typical of most of the Chickasaws. Some of the other tribes took on English names either earlier or later, but the short answer to your question is the names, the native names were all pretty much just one name.
Okay. Becky was asking if you're related to Wright.
Alan Wright, the Choctaw. No, my name is Seawright, 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 which the Seawright name is Old English. It's not native. Seawright's name married into the Chickasaws and Cherokees, actually. So that's where I get my native culture from. 1732nd Chickasaw and 1/8 Cherokee. So, but it's Seawright, not Wright. Alan Wright was Choctaw.
Well, and Sarah asked, or just stated that Netflix has a nice film about Telada, the storyteller.
Chickasaw Nation has 3 feature films that we've sponsored. Pearl, who was about Pearl Scott, an aviator. Then Teata came out probably 5 or 6 years ago. She was a storyteller, and it's been out on Netflix recently, and it's also on DVD. Pearl is on DVD. Along with Teata on Netflix is the story about Chickasaw rancher Montford, which just premiered November the 1st. So, and it's on Netflix. So I would encourage you to view those films. Gives you some in both Teata and Montford, give you some insight on what life was like in the early Chickasaw Nation.
Well, and Becky was also asking, what kind of shows do you have in the theater there at your culture center?
Typically, what we try to well, we featured all kinds of movies at the theater. Before it closed down for renovation, we would show feature films on Saturdays for the entire public to come and view all types of movies, not just native, but we try to bring in as many native movies as we can. To showcase, individuals, the West Studi movies, Dances with Wolves, Geronimo, and Last of the Mohicans, movies like that, and other movies that are related to or have Native Americans in their cast. But we periodically would also show the movies that we produced, again, Pearl, Teata, and hopefully when the theater reopens, we'll get to show Montford to all the Chickasaw people here who weren't able to see it on Netflix.
Okay.
Show a lot of children's shows also. Everything is family oriented type movies.
Okay, Wilson, great presentation today. I know I learned some new things about Native Americans that I wasn't aware of. And we were talking earlier about that Osage area up there, the native grasslands that are up there with the buffalo, and it's also
Yes.
a nice place to visit as well.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a hike from here, but if you want to get some good pictures of buffalo, that's a great place to go for sure. Getting some nice kudos in the chat about your presentation today, Wilson, and thank you very much. And with that, we're gonna transition, and you can stop sharing, Wilson, and Jeff Gladden is gonna introduce the photo club winners.
Okay, thank you all.